Well, hello, IDS 105 students, and welcome to week 4 in your IDS 105 term. Y'all, it is the halfway point of the term. I am so excited for you and the work and time and energy that you have put into this class so far. You are officially at the halfway point, which is exciting. So let's dive in and see what you have due in your classroom for Module 4. As always, your experience here at Southern New Hampshire University is important to us. It is our policy and practice to create an inclusive and accessible learning environment. If there are aspects of instruction or course design that present barriers to accessibility, please notify the Online Accessibility Center, the OAC, as soon as possible at 866-305-9430. You can also email them at oac@snhu.edu or visit the Online Accessibility Center website. Couple of reminders: SNHU Connect, our first year experience YouTube pages, your SNHU e-classrooms, they are all academic spaces, so always be mindful of your conduct. These webinars are not mandatory, they're not graded, there's not any extra credit points awarded, but I sure hope that they are helping you complete your assignments from week to week in your IDS 105 class, and that you have a little bit of fun along the way. Like I mentioned in the beginning, before I dive into all the reminders, you are now officially entering the halfway point of your term. So this is a great time to kind of check in, check your grade book, make sure that you are on track in your class. If you have fallen behind at all or struggled on some assignments, this is the time to get with your instructor to see if you can catch up, turn some things in that you were missing, or maybe redo them for points. They can always say no. However, it's always worth asking, okay? The next half of your term tends to go by pretty quickly. So please make sure that you are staying on top of your assignments and your coursework, and just take a minute and high five, celebrate the fact that you have made it to the halfway point of the term. So a few reminders for this week for Module 4. Week 4 is always, please be sure you're reading those course announcements. Such important stuff is posted in there by your instructors. Also, don't forget to check your university SNHU email. Again, if you're stuck, have questions, need to catch up, get back on track, or have something coming up and you want to see if you can work ahead, get with your instructor for any of your classes as soon as possible. Don't wait. We want you to be successful. So with us being in the halfway point of the term, which is so exciting, we are going to be working on our next project draft assignment this week, and you have a discussion. So as a reminder, those discussion assignments are initial post due on Thursday, peer responses on Sunday, along with your project draft due by Sunday. You guys have turned in a couple of these project drafts already, but just a couple of reminders about them is you want to make sure that you have that Microsoft Word or PDF or something compatible for that project draft, because there's a template that you should have been using all term long, right? As a reminder, video note assignments are not permitted for this project draft. You have to have them written out in that template. You do get Office 365 for free. If you haven't downloaded yet, I encourage you to get it. It'll make your life so much easier when it comes to these project drafts. As another reminder, make sure that you're paying attention to which questions you're answering for the project draft, because they are not in order. You picked a scenario back in week 2, right? You are still using that very same scenario to answer the questions in your project draft. As a reminder, you do not do anything or have to do anything with the conflict part of your scenario yet. That is coming next week, actually in Module 5. So you are still focusing just on the actual general scenario that you chose, either scenario 1, 2, or 3, for your project draft. Again, reminder, discussion assignment this week, initial post due on Thursday, peer responses, minimum of 2 due by Sunday, and then that project draft is due by Sunday. You can always work ahead. You can always turn them in earlier if that works for you and your schedule. So this week, we are going to be focusing in on the topic of communication. This is always one of my favorite topics, I think, because I like to talk. Anybody else like to do that? But what I think we forget about sometimes is communication isn't just verbal, right? Verbal communication is using that spoken word. We have written communication. So like writing, right? Like written communication. So think like, notes, cards, letters. In today's age, probably more emails, text messages, things like that, right? And most likely, you probably communicate most using written communication. I know I do. It takes a lot for me to pick up the phone. But we also have nonverbal communication and visual communication. So nonverbal communication is your body language. I always feel like body language can tell you a lot. Body language is things like communicating with your posture, gestures, or even silence, right? How many of you guys, when you're communicating with somebody in person, you notice what their face is saying before you notice anything else? Anybody else like that? Those visual cues that are out there, it's just so important for you to know that communication is so much more than just that spoken word. There are so many pieces and parts of our communication world, but also our own communication styles. So this week, you're going to be learning a lot more about general communication, but also the intent of communication versus the impact of communication. Because I don't know about y'all, but sometimes what we think we say isn't received in the way that we might have intended it to be said, right? Or heard, or vice versa. So it's really important to think about how you communicate. You know, are you somebody that text messages? Are you somebody that picks up the phone and calls? Do you prefer in-person communication? What is your communication style? How do you communicate best? How do you like to be communicated with? So think about all of these things, especially as you get into the discussion assignment this week, because for your initial discussion post, you're going to be focusing in on a situation where communication is important. So this can be in your daily life, work life, academic life. Also, if you prefer, you can pick something from a show or a show you watched or a movie that you watched or a book you read or even a recent event in the news. But I encourage you to think about a personal situation, because when we're aware of our own communication styles and preferences and situations, it can help us learn more about ourselves, right? So that first question is, you're going to discuss a situation where communication is important. So describe the situation and why it is important to you for that communication. The part two is to describe your own personal communication style preferences in the situation you described. So, do you prefer text messages? Do you prefer email, face-to-face, that phone call? Like I mentioned, think about the ways that you communicate best and how you like to be communicated with. And then the third part of your discussion assignment is what communication strategies would help enhance communication in the situation you described. So make sure, as always, that you are reviewing your module content. Also, make sure that you're reviewing those required resources to help you learn more about communication, its impact, its intention, different communication styles, and also for you to be able to answer your questions for your discussion assignment. As a reminder for that project draft, we have another project draft this week. You were to pick a scenario back in week 2. Scenario options were scenario 1, school, scenario 2, personal, scenario 3, workplace. You want to use that overview to help you answer the questions for module 4. As a reminder, we're not doing anything with the conflicts yet. That's going to come later. So make sure that you find those scenario profiles underneath supporting materials to help you answer the questions for this week. So this is our third project draft, and it's really important to pay attention to where those questions are, because they might not be in order. So for this week for module 4, you have a couple of questions that you are answering. Question 1 is to describe how an awareness of other cultures can benefit interpersonal communication with people in the scenario that you picked. Question number 2 is just to describe how exposure to diverse backgrounds can positively influence communication in the scenario you picked. Question 3, explain why an awareness of diversity is beneficial to collaboration in the scenario that you picked. Okay, so remember, when you're answering these questions, you're thinking about that scenario overview that you picked from the scenario profiles, but you also can draw in any personal, professional, or academic experiences into your answers, plus anything that you're learning in class. Make sure that your answers are providing those examples and you're giving that clear detail so that your instructor understands the perspective of where you are coming from as you answer your questions in your project draft, okay? So as a reminder, communication is key. We are focusing in on it for week 4, but also communication is key for your success in your academic spaces and classrooms. Make sure if you're stuck, you have questions, you're not sure on something, that you reach out, whether it's text message, email, or even that good old-fashioned phone. Because we want you to be successful here at SNHU. I'm going to take a minute just to show you really quick where you can find everything in your classroom for Module 4. Remember to go into your Brightspace classroom that learn.snhu.edu, and you want to click on Course Menu, Learning Modules, and go down to Module 4. When you do that, you will click on the Module 4 Introduction. Remember, click the blue, it gets you to where you want to go, which will provide you with an overview of what you're doing here this week. We already talked about it, but it's always good to review everything that's a part of your module. You will notice there's a lot of text and reading this week within your module. I encourage you to review it and understand it so that you can apply it in your discussion assignment and your project draft. Don't forget about these required resources section. It'll have some helpful videos in addition to your textbook reading that'll help you complete your assignments this week. Again, you have that discussion assignment, and then you have that project draft assignment. Remember that project draft assignment? You're using the same template you've been using all term long. You've already filled out at least or at least 2 of the sections, right? What you did in module 2, what you did in module 3, and now you're going to be filling out the third part, which is for module 4. As a reminder, you can always click on guidelines and rubric, goes over the assignment. When you scroll under here, under supporting materials, you'll see those scenario profiles, all the details and information about them, the overview. Remember, we're focusing on the scenario, not the conflicts here for week 4. If you get stuck, if you have questions, please make sure to reach out to your instructor. I'm so excited for you to finish the last half of your term. Remember, you got this, and I'll see you in week 5.